lot better myself.
Order. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. My question without notice is to the Prime Minister. Does the Prime Minister accept that the impending resignation of the Minister for Health, following that of the former Treasurer and the former Minister for Sports Shorts and the member for Maribyrnong, reflects a long procession of failed and disenchanted ministers? Does the consequential frequency of ministerial reshuffles concern the Prime Minister, or is he more interested in the gold prints on the walls of the Cabinet room rather than the quality of the galahs that are sitting round the table?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I should have thought it was a bit unusual, not even a little bit unusual, that ministers who had served a decade or more in the hothouse environment of the greatest reformation in the Australian economy and society over a decade should have the kind of reformation, Mr. Speaker, that's given us the once in 30-year conjunction of high growth and low inflation and a shift to a great productivity culture, the rebuilding of our education system, the emphasis on research and development and product innovation. All these things, Mr. Acting Speaker, that as a consequence we have seen a change of personnel in the ministry and the cabinet. Now, some ministers elected not to contest the last election. Senator Button was obvious among them. After the election, the former member for Bonython made clear that he thought that he shouldn't take on further major ministerial responsibilities. And latterly, Mr. Speaker, after just on 11 years of the most backbreaking effort, the former member for Fremantle announced his resignation to this House. Now, Mr. Speaker, after a phenomenal record of change that will stand him in particular, as others in good stead through the balance of their lives, public or private, and now, Mr. Speaker, I think that we are seeing this kind of change, and no doubt. Any person who served in the parliament a long time and in high public office a long time has the option to do these things. But, Mr. Speaker, the important thing about the government is that the government is changing its membership and strengthening the stock of members for the next 20 years. The government is going through a process of genuine renewal, And if one looks at the people who have replaced the former members for Werriwa and for Fremantle and Bonython in the categories of post-war service to this parliament and in post-war ministries in this country, those people would stand up against any other in that company. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased about the fact that the Labor Party has not only had the wit, the imagination, the flair, the verve to change Australia, but as well, in the process of it, making a change to a new group of ministers and members to keep the change going, to keep the reform going. And as a consequence, the Labor Party is now a party of office.
The honourable member for Mayo.
There's a great leavening of ministerial experience across the stock of members and ministers. We've got the former. We have in our backbench people of substantial and long-standing ministerial experience, like the former Attorney General, who's on the backbench. So on the front and the backbench, we have this now, I'm happy to say, long tradition of effective public office. Now, Mr. Speaker, by contrast, who's coming on the coalition side? The person replacing the member for Mackellar, it has nothing like the progressive social views or contact with the community that the former member had, or the former member for Warringah, who at least was able sensibly to relate to the kind of society we now have. As I said the other day, Mr Speaker, they're being replaced by fogies. Fogies. A fogie being a person who's attached to old values and old norms that are now irrelevant. And it is true to say that I think we're seeing a combination of old fogies and young fogies coming into, but nevertheless, 24-carat fogies nevertheless, Mr Speaker. Now, Mr Speaker, I know, in the high professionalism of public life, what that means to a party. I know when I look at these poor, dispirited people opposite, the remnants of Australia's failed upper class and management group, the Born to Rule squad have been out now, mournfully, wistfully, for 11 years, going on 13, know that when they see the likes of Bronwyn Bishop and Tony Abbott coming into their ranks, their hearts must sink. Their hearts must sink. Now, Mr Speaker, I know that to be a fact because professionalism demands such a response. I can only say, Mr Speaker, for the sake of the country, I hope the Coalition at some time gather a stock of people with contemporary views about Australia together, because we as sure as hell are on this side of the House. And can I say that that Mr Martin Evans, who was just sworn in as member for Bonython, and earlier in the week Dr Carmen Lawrence as member for Fremantle, will, Mr Speaker, reflect grandly on the Federal Labor Party, I hope, for a long time to come.
Order the honourable member for